agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bill Graham.
Here.
Deb Gesualdo.
Here.
Donna Hopkins. Jorge Sanchez Salazar.
Present.
David McKenna.
In the affirmative.
Bob Gamer. Charles Desmond.
I'm present.
Todd Pollack.
Here.
Kristen Perkins.
Here.
Amanda Sims. Staff and liaison. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Eileen Page.
Here.
Eric Crane.
Here.
David Mills.
Present. Thank you.
Lieutenant Rob Sullivan.
Here.
Pastor Douglas Voigt. This open meeting to the Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gathering, and as such, the governor's order suspend the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda material for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee is convening remotely via the WebEx app, as posted on the town website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the second item of the agenda. But before I do so, permit me to convey some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so to myself, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. The second item on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes of March 18, 2021. I will need a motion for.
I move we approve the meetings, the minutes.
I second it. Paul Pollack
And
seconds it.
that was the motion by Bill Graham. And who was that second?
Paul Pollack.
Okay, Paul Pollack second. Any discussion? Hearing none. So I'll go down the list of members for the approval of the minutes of March 18, 2021. Bill Graham,
Approve.
Deb Gesualdo,
Approve.
Jorge Sanchez Salazar,
Approve.
David McKenna,
approve,
Charles Desmond,
Yes.
Paul Pollack,
Approve.
Kristen Perkins,
Approve.
and I am approved. Eileen, did anybody else join us?
Donna is here.
Donna Hopkins,
Approve.
thank you. So the minutes of March 18, 2021 are approved as presented. I will now move on to the third item on the agenda, which is an update from the Education Subcommittee meeting on April 9. The subcommittee did have a meeting on April 9 with the school officials and our school liaison. It was a very productive meeting. It was a great, I remember we had two students who spoke of some of the great things that the school is doing and the anti-discrimination club at the school is doing to improve inclusion and acceptance within the school system. I think one of the subcommittee members said at some point when Max and Lil were presenting, those are the two students, they thought they were faculty because they were so well spoken and had a lot of passion into what they were saying. I'm not gonna elaborate on this too much because I'm sure Eric during the school committee update might have a lot more details as to what transpired during that meeting. Charlie, anything you want to add?
No, it was a very impressive meeting. Lots of very wonderful conversations and deep dialogue by students, faculty, and others.
Paul, anything else? I know Eric is probably going to touch base on a lot of this, but anything you want to add, Paul?
Well, a couple of things I think we discussed and we were made aware of is that the Anti-Discrimination Club does meet and confer with SUFA, which is the other organization within the school. Also, that the teachers and advisors have been very helpful with the teachers and advisors' past experiences in other school systems. So when topics come up, they have another outlet for information coming from both the teachers and advisors. And I asked the question about whether they experience any negativity from other students because they are active in this anti-discrimination club. And pretty much they would say, I think, and maybe Charles and Eric's there, they might disagree with the way I interpreted it, but I suspected not a tremendous amount of negativity, but at certain times, it does appear, but the people that are in the club, especially the two leaders, are very strong in their beliefs. And once that is expressed, then the sort of, I guess, attempt to maybe disparage them a little bit subsides. I guess that's the best way I could put it in my own words. And I thought that was very interesting. And the last thing I would mention is that I asked them what was the makeup of the club. Was it sort of, I was trying to get at whether it was a senior dominated club or whether sophomore or junior senior, but not necessarily. Pretty well dispersed from the freshman level right up through the senior class. So again, like Dee said, I thought it was very enlightening, and it was a great experience hearing from the students. And like Dee said, thought we were talking to faculty for a few minutes early on in the conversation. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Paul. Eileen, can you help me if someone raised their hand because I'm using a small screen? I can't see everyone on my screen. Is there anyone who has a question or comment?
Dee, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. I'll comment after.
No, I was just going to say, it doesn't look like anyone has a hand up, so go ahead, Charlie.
No, I wanted to just say I was trying to be probably overly concerned about time, and I don't want to go on at length about the discussion. But I think it's absolutely important that members of this committee at some time attend one of the school meetings that we have, the subcommittee meetings, because to listen to what the faculty are doing, what the students are doing, and how Lisa Dana and her team is leading the school K through 12 is just so inspiring. It really is a testimony to the decades-long work that we all on this committee have been doing, and the excellent leadership that we have in the school system, that we've been making what I consider to be so much progress with our efforts at the school. I'll also say that I'm very impressed that a number of faculty members at our school department have been participating in programs that have been offered at Teachers College at Columbia University. I'm a trustee at Teachers College at Columbia, so I'm very impressed by the fact that our faculty are participating in programs that are happening at Columbia. They're taking good professional development, ongoing professional development, and participating in programs that are nationally recognized and incorporating these efforts at our work in Danvers. So aside from everything that was discussed, I'm extremely impressed with what they're doing. I have to say, the only issue that I've raised for the last 2 decades that I've been involved with this work on the diversity committee, and beyond that, more than that, with my own children going through the Danvers public school system, I still feel that we have to keep in mind that we are not making a lot of progress with regards to faculty diversity in Danvers High School. And I want to say that there's an avalanche of data that says not only do students of color benefit from having faculty who are diverse, majority students benefit as well. It prepares them for the complexities of the world that we're sending our graduates to be ambassadors for the world, our emissaries all over the earth, speaking on our behalf on the type of world and the type of education systems that we'd like to see. So I want to just say that I'm not sure when it's going to happen. I'm sure it will happen eventually, but we need to keep our eye on the ball with regards to what are the things that we can do to attract this, faculty to Danvers High School that are coming from different backgrounds, and consider deeply the contribution that they can make mold and own our students to be successful as they go out into a more complex world than any of us have ever lived in before. So
Thank,
that's my comment.
thank you, Dr. Charlie. Eileen, anyone
Dee, I
else?
did see Bill has his hand up.
I just finished reading the scholarship applications. We have 12 of them. And one of the most impressive things was the work that they've done with the Anti-Discriminatory Committee.
Thank you.
And Dee, if you don't mind, I'll just add as a reminder to the scholarship subcommittee that we are scheduled to meet on Thursday, the 29th at, I believe it's 5 o'clock. I have to double check that, but I'll send a reminder email, but we're still on for that date. And by our May meeting, we will have an announcement on the winner or winners of the 2021 scholarship.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Rob has a hand up as well.
I just wanted to respond to Dr. Desmond. It's just a few nights ago, we present our Welcoming Communities Working Group presented to the select board. And one of the areas that the group made a recommendation to was hiring a town staff employee as the director of equity and inclusion. And one of the tasks this person would be assigned is getting a larger pool and more diverse pool of applicants for positions townwide. So hopefully that's an item they're able to address sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Lieutenant Rob. Anyone else, Eileen? I can't see it. Perfect. None. I will now move on to the fourth item on the agenda, which is we have Juneteenth coming up, and I work with Deb Gesualdo. We did draft a Juneteenth proclamation that we wanted to share with this committee, and upon comment and editing if necessary, I would love us to vote on this, adopt it, and present it to the select board for approval for our town. Deb, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Dee. Good evening, everyone. As you know, we got in our email a draft of a Juneteenth proclamation for our consideration. And before jumping into that, I just really want to thank Dee for his edits to the document, and both Eileen and Dee for their feedback on it. As a public body that has a focus on, as our committee's name indicates, human rights and inclusion, it seems really apropos for us to vote on a Juneteenth proclamation to send to the select board for their approval. Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration of the abolition of slavery in the US, and specifically Juneteenth marks the day in 1865 that Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, more than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation to deliver another proclamation that all people in Texas, and most specifically enslaved African American people, were now free. And, Juneteenth serves as a day to celebrate the day all African American slaves were finally freed. And it also serves as a day for people to celebrate Black and African American culture, reflect on the meaning of freedom, and recommit themselves to the continued struggle for racial equity. Juneteenth is celebrated, I believe, in all but 3 states now, and it's celebrated in communities across the country and across Massachusetts. I think the drafted Juneteenth proclamation speaks for itself, so I'll let it do just that. And if anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And I guess I just have a procedural question. I know it works a little differently in each municipality, and I'm not as familiar with procedural things in Danvers. Does it need to be officially read into the record, or can people just review it and ask questions if necessary?
I think it would be a good idea to read it, because there might be people watching at home or listening who did not have a chance to review it before. So if you want to take a minute and just read it, that would be great.
Sure, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to go ahead and check with you. Thank you. And so the proclamation reads, whereas the town of Danvers is a community that is working together to be a more equitable, inclusive, and just community, and whereas the town of Danvers are made up of people who come from all over the earth, both near and far, and whereas in Danvers we believe that freedom and justice for all are essential cornerstones of a civil, healthy, and just society, and whereas Juneteenth commemorates and celebrates the end of slavery in the United States of America, as the proclamation reached the last remaining enslaved African Americans in the Confederacy, and whereas Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger led Union soldiers into Galveston, Texas to announce that the Civil War had ended and that the Emancipation Proclamation had declared all enslaved people free nearly 2.5 years earlier. And whereas Major General Gordon Granger said, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates and celebrates African American freedom, education, and achievement, and whereas Juneteenth is a time for community reflection, self-reflection, and planning for a better future, and whereas Juneteenth is a day in many communities across the country marked with celebration, guest speakers, picnics, and gatherings of friends and family, and whereas the town of Danvers acknowledges that the history of our town and the United States of America is plagued by racism and commits itself as a community to the principles of equity, inclusion, and the work of actively disrupting systemic and institutional racism to create the free and just society we all want to live in. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that the 19th of June will be a day to commemorate Juneteenth in the town of Danvers, and urge all members of the community to rededicate themselves to furthering the promise of equity, freedom, inclusion, and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should just go down the list of members for comments instead of waiting for the hand raising. Eileen, can you see everyone?
I can see everybody, yes.
Okay. So any comments, questions? So just let me know when someone would like to speak, if there's a hand up.
I see Dave McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's definitely something we should support. And you want a motion to have the committee approve this? If so, I will make that motion.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the Juneteenth proclamation draft as presented. Any discussions? I need someone to second the motion first.
Second.
Second by, that was the motion.
I'd like to third the motion.
Okay.
Motion by David McKenna, second by Dr. Charlie. Any discussion?
I'd like to say something, please.
Sure.
That is Paul.
Oh, it's Paul Paula.
Yes.
I totally endorse the proclamation. I just had a couple of sidebar questions. One was just me being me, but what states do not acknowledge June 13th? If you could just fill me in so I'm not surprised at some point. Does anybody know?
I can Google it and have that answer.
If you just email me, that's fine. I'd appreciate that.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. It looks like Deb does have it.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's North Dakota, South Dakota, and Hawaii.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions I have, but I totally endorse. Oh, one other last thing. Now, Deb, and who else participated in preparing this proclamation? I think it's done very well. Could you, everyone? I want everybody to take credit that had something to do with it. Eileen, were you involved with it too?
Not really. It was mostly Deb and Dee.
Don't be bashful, Eileen. Okay,
No, credit to Deb and Dee for sure.
Thank you very much. I totally endorse it.
Good. David Mills has a hand up.
Go ahead, David Mills.
David, can you hear us?
Yes, thanks. I was just trying to unmute me. I think the proclamation is absolutely wonderful. There is a reference in there to slavery in Danvers. And we, among other things, my chairman of the board, of the select board, Dan Bennett, is very, very careful. And I wouldn't be surprised if he picks up on that and says, what is this slavery in Danvers stuff? And I think that it is important for us to acknowledge Dick Trask has done some study on this, of course, like everything else, as has Bill Clark. And it's amazing to me to find out, among other things, that most, except for I think the Baptist church down in Danvers Port, all of the Protestant ministers in Danvers had slaves at one point. And so I just want us if anybody comments upon that and says, what do you mean slaves in Danvers? Yes, we had slaves in Danvers. We also had a wonderful society, an anti-slavery society that was centered really in the Maple Street Church. And as I understand it, the Maple Street Church was established as a walkout from the First Congregational Church up in the Highlands, which was a pro-slavery church, and the Maple Street Church became a vocal anti. So let's just say there was certainly activity in Danvers with respect to slavery. So if anyone says, what is that in there for? It's in there, I think, because it was properly drafted and it is consistent with history, and it's important for us to own our own situations. Okay, thank you.
Eileen, can I respond? Paul.
It's totally up to D.
D, Eileen. All right.
Go ahead, Paul.
Then in that case, and I'm sure David is correct on this. Maybe we should have Mr. Trask at this select board meeting if this topic comes up. Possibility, but I'm not sure what his schedule's like, but maybe he'd be willing to show up. Or maybe not. Maybe it's not necessary. But he is the well-respected town historian.
Definitely something we could consider if this committee is necessary. I would say that that reference in the document, actually, I won't say it came from Mr. Trask, but I suggested that after I had spoken to him and he confirmed to me that yes, that is something that had actually occurred in our town.
Okay.
I see Deb Gesualdo has her hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Deb.
I think it's important to face history head on, and to be definitely prepared for questions. But I think it's also important when this is put before the select board to preface this, I think, as with any difficult topic that has its roots in a really painful past, to, preface it with the fact that things like this can make people feel some type of discomfort, and people should feel discomfort. And with discomfort and reflection comes growth and change. And people shouldn't feel good when they think about either the part our town played in people owning slaves, which is like the most wrong thing that could ever be done. And people shouldn't feel good about perpetuating white fragility. And people should, start getting used to sitting in the discomfort of that and reflecting. And so I think it's, really good to face it head on and to help guide people who might be a little uncomfortable with it through facing that kind of stuff head on.
Thank you, Deb. Any further discussions?
David Mills has a hand up.
May I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, David.
In response to Paul's comment, Dick Trask is, like me, mobility limited. I'm confident that Dick would write a 2-paragraph little statement commenting upon the history of slavery in Danvers, because if you'll recall, a couple of months ago at this committee meeting, we talked about asking Dick to participate with us in the presentation of a program on our local cable TV about slavery in Danvers. And he was most willing to do that. And I then found out that Bill Clark had written a history of one of the churches, maybe the Congregational Church in Danvers, and had included documentation and comment on slavery in Danvers. I'm just saying that I don't know that it could be a big, who knows? Who knows? Deborah's comment is very, very far reaching and powerful to me. How people are going to react, I'm not sure. Who's going to say, we don't need a Juneteenth because that doesn't concern, I don't know. I don't think so out of this board, but I can't speak for them. But I can say that if Dee were to ask, or asked Paul Pollock to be in touch with Dick Trask, explaining the circumstance and our concern that the documentation be in the proclamation and that we be prepared to give it a Dick Trask footnote for credibility and authenticity, that might be a healthy thing for us to do in preparation for this. That's my thought.
David. Eileen, any other hands? Any further
Yes,
discussion?
Bill has his hand up.
Yes. I'd like to point out, Danvers was not in the least bit unique in people having had slaves. I've just been reading a biography of John Woolman, who was a Quaker prior to the Revolutionary War. And the majority of the Quakers at that time had slaves, even though eventually they became a church which opposed slavery.
Thank you. Any further discussions?
Dave McKenna and Charlie also have their hands up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dave McKenna,
I think that I think it's actually more common than any of us is willing to believe. As someone said, pretty much all the ministers in this town had slaves. We know Titchabo, who started the witchcraft craze, was a slave. I was just speaking with a gentleman who was writing a book about black slaves who fought the American Revolution, and one was Prince Buxton, who was buried in the cemetery down on Buxton Road. And even the Endicott Cemetery over behind Hollywood Hits, it's well known that there are slaves buried outside the wall, slaves of the Endicott family. So it's something that happened quite regularly in Danvers and in all communities throughout New England and throughout the colonies for the first 100 years or more of our history. So I think it's something we need to address. You don't learn from history by ignoring it or hiding it or banishing it. You got to look it straight in the face and learn from it. And I think that's what we need to do here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm sorry, Dr. Charlie. I think you're muted.
Charlie, I sent you a request to unmute. There we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to, that I just simply wanted to say that the issue of the fact that there was pervasive slavery in America is not the question. I think that makes America, what makes America unique, what makes America special, what makes America unique in the world is not that they had slavery and that it was pervasive and that it existed in many places in this country. It was that America turned its back on slavery and said, in this country, there are principles and ideals, values and issues that we think that go beyond the condition of slavery, and that this country is not going to be supportive of that. Now, there are still people who may harbor feelings or promote views that are dismissive of certain people within our society, but that is not what makes this country unique. That's not what makes this country viewed in the world, in the eyes of the world, so special. What makes this country so unique and so special is that it's proposing values and principles that embrace all of humanity. So you can't say we enslaved this group of people or we enslaved that group of people. This country is saying we're not enslaving any group of people. It's inadmissible in this country. It will not be accepted in this country. That's what's unique about America. It's not that they freed the slaves who happened to be African Americans. It doesn't matter who the group is that was enslaved. All over the world, people are enslaved and persecuted and marginalized. They're not Black people. All over the world, this is happening. This is the only country that's saying it's unacceptable to us. We will not tolerate this. And if you come to this country or you want to be a part of who we are in this country, you will not propose strategies and philosophies that denigrate the value of any citizens within our society, within humanity. I think it's important for us to advance this statement 2.5 years after the emancipation, to tell people that they have been free for 2.5 years and they weren't. And now we're just simply saying we should acknowledge that. I think it's important for us to do that, but the overarching and most important issue is this country stands for something that has endured longer than any constitutional government in the history of civilization, and we all should be proud of that.
Thank you, Dr. Charlie.
Dee, before we go to a vote, could I make one suggestion to throw out there for group discussion?
Sure.
So the only thing I notice is that we do continuously use the word slaves and slave as a noun, and I know and other people might be able to weigh in on this as well. I know in a lot of high schools right now, there's a big push by history teachers to reframe that as enslaved people or people who were enslaved versus using slave as an identity. It's more of a adjective. Hopefully I'm explaining that correctly. So it just might be something that we want to consider tweaking the language just a bit. And Deb, I saw you nodding your head there, so I think I'm on the right track here. And it's not something that needs to be rewritten and then voted. If that's something that the committee wanted to do, we can just say, approve it with this change. And I see Deb's hand up.
Yeah, I actually had been trying to get in touch with a few of my history teacher friends as I was writing it, and unfortunately, they got back to me after the draft had been sent out because I wanted to make sure I was using the appropriate language. History is not my major area of study. Well, it's something I have a deep interest in. It's not my area of expertise, and I thought that was correct, but was unsure. So I didn't want to go one way, and I thought that could be an editorial change, as you suggested, but I would agree with you that is the correct way, and that was confirmed by many people who know much more than I do, of course, after the draft had been sent out.
Perfect. And I do see Dave McKenna's hand up, Dee, if we want to take like one last comment.
Yeah, as the
David.
maker of the motion, I will accept that as a friendly amendment. And I just want to say too, I appreciate everything Charles said, and that is exactly what we stand for. And yet we still have enslaved people in this country. I think one of the biggest purveyors right now are some of the massage parlors, where we just have one of those horrific mass shootings of people who are virtually enslaved. And it's still going on. We have not gotten there yet. We need to keep working and be diligent. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So David is making the motion with the edit. those words. I will need a second.
Bill had
Hold on.
seconded, as long as Bill wants
Procedurally,
to.
Eileen, do we have to vote on the first motion first, or can we just change it?
Nope, as long as David had said he amended his motion, so that's okay. And then Bill can still be the second as long as Bill agrees with
I
that
agree.
amendment. And then we can just vote.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go down the list of members to be voted on to approve this draft with the minimal edit that David indicated in his motion, and this will then be presented to the select board for approval. Bill Grant,
Approve.
Deb Gesualdo,
Approve.
Donna Hopkins,
I absolutely approve.
Jorge Sanchez Salazar,
I approve.
Evan McKenna,
Absolutely approve.
Charles Desmond, I think Charles is still muted.
Yes.
Sorry, approve.
Thank you. Paul Pollack,
Approve.
Kristen Perkins,
Approve.
and was Amanda able to join us, Eileen?
She is not. No, she is not here.
Okay. And then I'm approved. So the Juneteenth proclamation is approved, and we will be putting that in the proper format to be presented to the select board.
Yep, Deb, don't worry about it. I'll take care of making those changes, and I will send it over to the town manager's office to be included with the select board.
And when we have it on the select board agenda, we will notify members of this committee to and urge all of you to attend that meeting if possible. I will now move on to the next item on the agenda. The fifth item on the agenda, which is the pride flag ceremony. Every year, I believe for the past 9 or 10 years, we've raised the pride flag in front of town hall and at the police station and few places around town. So last year we did it virtually because of the pandemic, and hopefully this year we can get back and do that in person. I'm not sure what the committee would like to do. I don't know if we want to have a small subcommittee to plan the event, but I would like us to start thinking about the dates. Usually we do it because it's June, so I was suggesting we could do it on the 2nd of June, which is a Wednesday at 10 a.m., or maybe the 1st of June. I don't know if in the past we've done it on Thursday evening because town hall is open late on Thursday. But the problem is Thursday evening there's also a lot of meetings, and sometimes that could be a problem. And also
Let me take a look and
students,
see what's planned for the 3rd of June right now.
having students participation is so important. In the past we've had Sufa and Dr. Dana and a lot of some teachers participate. So having it in the morning, that will also give them a chance to run and get it done and go back instead of having them go home and come back at night.
So right now on June 3rd, there is a Board of Health meeting. Oh, I'm just going to mute some people. There's a Board of Health meeting at 6 o'clock at night. Dee, I know you sit on the Board of Health. Other than that,
I said June 2nd at 10 a.m.
oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Nothing scheduled right now for June 2nd.
So we can, and I know it's the first Wednesday of the month, which is half a day for students. So if we do it too late, or the students will be out already. I'm not sure. Any suggestions? Any?
Can I make a suggestion? The only thing is with some new members joining us, I know at least all three of our members do work full time and are probably not available in the mornings on a weekday. And you can correct me, maybe schedules change, I'm not sure. But I would just hate to, I know it's more convenient maybe to do it in the morning, but I would hate to leave out three of our brand new members, especially in their very first year. I'm just going to put that out there and let people discuss that. I see Kristen and David Mills have hands.
I have been at the last 10, I think for 10 years, we've been doing the flag in front of the town hall. I think about other places of doing it, like at the high school, but I think the town hall is a good place. And I realize and thank people for, there's lots of meetings going on. But Thursday afternoon at around 4:30 has worked out well because there have been a lot of employees in. Whether our employees will be back to the town hall, who knows? But it was kind of designed that way so that we would have a larger audience. And the audience seemed to grow every year, including the police um, um, participation was in the last couple of years stunning. There were like 8 or 9 police officers when we had the last live one we had. So I like Thursdays around 4:30 because it gets more of the town employees who seem to be very cooperative. I also think the more students, always the better. But that's all I think. I just want to say that.
Thank you, David. Kristen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of my schedule, with enough advance, I can be flexible. But I actually was going to ask the question that David addressed of, wanting to get more of the town involved, and I think there would likely be a greater turnout after the traditional work hours. But I'm personally open.
Thank you. So should we have a tentative date of that Thursday will be June, I believe. Yeah.
That would be June 3rd if we did it that Thursday.
So should we have a tentative date of June 3rd at 4:30? And then I will have a subcommittee, put a subcommittee together to work on the details. Will that work?
I'm seeing nodding.
Any objection?
Thumbs up.
Okay, perfect. So I mean, let the record show that we have a tentative date of June 3rd at 4:30 for the pride flag, and then more detail will follow on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we want to establish a subcommittee now for that? We can, and then I know who to email with. We can have up to 5 people on the subcommittee.
Sure, I can do that. I can't see everyone on the screen, but if anyone who, I mean, if there's no volunteer, I'll volunteer people. Anyone who would like to be a member of the Pride Flag Ceremony Subcommittee? Eileen, let me know if someone raised their hand.
Yep, I've got Kristen and Donna. Deb. And it's okay if it's a smaller group too. Don't feel guilted into anything.
So we have Kristen, Donna, and Deb.
And David Mills as well.
Well, I'm
sorry.
Not a member.
I'm not a committee member, but I can certainly, I think, attend if the subcommittee invites me, I can attend the meeting without screwing up a quorum prohibition.
Exactly.
Okay. So thank you very much, and Eileen is gonna follow up with an email for the dates you will meet to get that. Perfect. I will now move on to the sixth item on the agenda, which is a discussion on the vigil or some kind of demonstration for the victims of the AAPI hate crime that we all know. I think David McKenna alluded to that earlier.
David Mills had asked for this item to be on the agenda, so I did put his name next to it.
And I know Bob Gamer had also, unfortunately, he's not here today. I know he wanted to speak of this as well, but he's unable to join us today. David.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you if you said something.
Sorry, my speaker is not the best today. I'm using my phone. So, David, we are discussing the sixth item on the agenda, which is the vigil or the demonstration for the victims of the API hate crime that occurred.
Yeah, I think spoken to you, Dee, and perhaps to Eileen and to probably Donna about my concern that nothing happened in Danvers Square by way of a signed demonstration in support of Asian American people who I now understand are feeling terribly frightened in this country. Not that we have too many Asian Americans living in Danvers. That doesn't really make a difference. The difference is, I believe, that we speak up and stand up for this particular marginalized group that is under. It's like trans women. It's like an epidemic of murder of trans women in this country at this time. And the every day there's a story about an elderly Asian lady being, tripped and knocked down on the sidewalk. So I just thought that our committee should sponsor something, and I'll go out and hold a sign if someone else does the scheduling and if the committee chooses to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I know Bob had also raised that issue. I wish he was here. He will elaborate much better than I could. Any comments or questions?
Charlie has his hand up.
Yes, Dr. Charlie.
Charlie, I sent a request to unmute you.
I'm sorry, I'm not muting myself. You must be muting me. So thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I just wanted to say that I wholeheartedly support David's comment with regards to doing something with regards to what's happening to Asian Americans in our country. And I think that it's important for us in Danvers, particularly because they're on an overwhelming majority of Asian Americans in Danvers, for us to stand up, speak up, and be recognized to say, again, this is unacceptable in this country. And if the problem is that these smaller voices are getting all of this currency and attention because the majority of people who oppose these behaviors are not standing up and speaking up and saying that it's unacceptable. So we have to, unfortunately, over and over again, it falls on the shoulders of us to show that this is unacceptable. We're not going to accept it. And we are going to stand up, and I think other people will follow when they see us doing it. This is a town of leaders. We're not a town of followers. So I think that this is a good time for us to stand up and do something.
Bill Graham has a hand up.
Bob Gamer and I participated in the demonstration in Beverly, and I know Bob really wanted to see us do something in Danvers and have the Inclusion Committee being responsible for organizing it.
Kristen Perkins has her hand up.
I also joined the demonstration in Beverly, and if we do something in Danvers, it would be great to give a little more notice. I learned of the Beverly demonstration maybe a day or two before, which I think is when it was posted. And so I would very much support doing something in Danvers, and we may notice a greater turnout if we can give more than a couple of days notice. Just an idea.
Rob Sullivan has a hand up.
Lieutenant Rob.
Oh, so I just wanted to point out to the committee, in addition to our residents and business owners and people who might visit Danvers from an Asian background, those of us who are town employees, we have an Asian American member that works for the town. She and I had a couple-hour conversation the other day about a lot of different human rights issues. She's absolutely brilliant and amazingly talented. And we're lucky to have her working for us. But part of our conversation was how this has impacted her and her family, and how she is fearful to go out. So it was very, it hit home. It wasn't just knowing, I've known her for a while now. So to see it impacting her live there in person in front of me was pretty powerful.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Rob. So procedurally, I think David McKenna and maybe Eileen will help me here. How will we proceed? Do we have a subcommittee organize a vigil and get hold of some stakeholders, or do we get a permit? Lieutenant Rob, you might help us with this too. Does that require a permit? How do we do that? I know there was one that was done last year, but it was more an ad hoc of citizens. It wasn't organized by the committee, even though some committee members were present and participate. How would we go about procedurally?
I'm going to defer to Rob on that one. I've never experienced going through the process of pulling a permit or anything like that. So Rob might have a bit more information than I do.
I've never actually done it myself either, but it is possible that we need to have that done. I can find out tonight and email Dee and Eileen what the answer is. The last the demonstration in the square was not town sponsored. It was just a group of individuals who on their own came together to do a good thing. So whether they needed a permit or not, nobody asked them if they had one. So that also wasn't an issue if people just show up and hold signs. So if we didn't have one and needed one, we wouldn't be moved along. It would. But now that we've got it out there in the forefront, I'll make sure we get what we need to have, and I'll get back to everybody on what it is.
Thank you. Dee, can I add something?
Yes.
Yeah, so I know, this might all seem a bit delayed, not that these hate crimes are not ongoing, but, the shooting in Atlanta was a little while ago. But I'm not sure if in doing research for the newsletter this month or in May, which I know I'm horribly behind on, and I will be in touch with the newsletter subcommittee. Actually, May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So this actually comes at a very apt, a very appropriate time. And I would suggest that in addition to, this being, I know this sort of sparked a sort of a vigil and a demonstration of solidarity. I would love if we could frame it as well around celebrating heritage too. And because, there's like 48 Asian countries and tens of thousands of Pacific Islands. It's not one culture, it's not one heritage. So I'd love if we could kind of put some focus there on celebrating that as well. Just something to think about. And I see Deb has her hand up as well, Dee, if you want to call on her.
Yes, go ahead, Deb.
To Eileen's point, I wasn't able to go to the vigil in Beverly, but I took part in one in Malden where I work, where just about a quarter of the community in Malden is either Asian or Pacific Islander. And it was a really unique event because part of it was a candlelight vigil, but part of it also celebrated Asian and Pacific Islander culture, and the local Walloon Academy had dancers, and there were singers, and there was a drum performance, and it was really amazing. And, the Greater Malden Asian American Coalition had some of their teen activists help plan it, but also they read poetry and they spoke, and it was really I think really powerful to not only have the vigil part, but also to celebrate the heritage in a really, I think, culturally appropriate way. So I would definitely encourage, if there's a way to incorporate things like that, to do so. And I think it's really important that we, you know, as everyone said, that we do something, because I think it's important to make it known to people that as a community, we're not going to make it comfortable for people to spread hate and violence and fear in Danvers.
Thank you very much. So before I move on the next agenda item, will we do we pick a date, or what's the next step? Do I do it? I feel like this is probably the committee in town that has the most subcommittee ever. I don't
We have about 60 subcommittees going at any given time.
We have subcommittees for everything, which I think is very helpful and valuable for people to meet in small group and hash things out, and that's really appreciated. What is the next step? Do we get a date, and does the committee say that we are okay with putting something together, and then we have suggested dates and do flyers? How do we move forward procedurally?
So I don't know that it necessarily requires a vote.
Okay.
One thing I do want to do, and I just, because we don't know if it requires a permit or anything like that, I think once Rob finds out, I also want to check in with Town Hall, because we also want to be very, I know this is a very important event, but we also want to be very conscious of COVID restrictions as well, and look into what those are at the same time, because we want to make sure this is as safe as possible. So I think because this is a town committee or town sponsored committee, we just want to make sure we have, you know, the town seal of approval as well to move forward. But I think once Rob finds out about the permit, if we want to have a group that would like me to get in touch with them once we have more information, once I get that, I'm happy to send out an email and say, let's set up a time to hop on a call and talk and pick a date and a flyer and get in touch with people about this.
Okay, but it doesn't necessarily require that group to come back and get a vote from this committee. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, and I think Dave McKenna might be able to weigh in too, but from what I can tell, it doesn't sound like there's anything we're doing here that really needs a official vote. Dave, do you have any insight on that?
I'm not sure why we would need a voter, or why you're asking me. I've been out of the loop so long. Dave
Oh, I'm
knows
sorry. I
probably
thought you had a lot of information about about open
just
meeting
because I'm
law.
old doesn't mean I know everything. Procedurally, yeah, I don't know that we necessarily need to have a vote on this. We're going to sponsor an event. I think we can do it without a vote. And as far as a permit, I think at least notifying the police that we're doing it, just so they know there's going to be a group gathering, is always a good idea. Whether we need an actual permit for it from the selectmen to assemble, that we might want to check with the town clerk's office and just make sure. And I'm sure Eileen can do that. But I don't really think we need necessarily a vote on this.
Great. Okay.
Okay,
So are there a few individuals that might want to be involved then that I could email once we know where we stand on paperwork? I see
yes,
Charlie's hand.
I know Bob is not here today, but I'm sure you can put him on because
I
Bob
will.
and Bill.
I see Charlie and then Bill, and then I'll put Bob on there as well.
Yes.
Okay. And Rob, can I put you on those emails as well?
Yes, please. I was just texting with Captain Lovell. He's also going to check with
Okay,
the
perfect.
Conwell the month. We'll make sure our answer is correct.
Perfect. And I see David Mills has a hand up, D, if you want to call on him.
If the subcommittee invites me, I would certainly take part in anything that I could help with.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. This is great. I will now move on to the 7th item on the agenda, which is the school committee liaison update. I used to say pass the floor, but I'll say pass the screen to Eric Crane.
All right, thank you very much, Dee. Excuse me. We've talked a little bit, or you talked a little bit about the recent subcommittee meeting. I will add a little more detailed as to what was discussed there, and hopefully give the members here a flavor of some of the activities that are going on with the faculty, staff, students. And then I would be happy after that to take any questions that people might have on either that or any other subjects that you might be interested in. I'll try and answer anything that I can answer. So first of all, you already mentioned, I think, the work of Lil and Max in leading the Anti-Discrimination Club. And I would only add to that you know, they're getting a lot of faculty support as well, but they are a remarkable pair of individuals who are leading this effort. And I think we're very lucky. They sort of, to me, represent the best of the Danvers High School community, trying to make things better for, you know, their fellow students. And, you know, that will continue to be an active committee, I am sure, as the years pass. 70 staff members are part of a Becoming an Anti-Racist Educator study group, reflecting on their beliefs and biases and looking at practice and procedures for sort of an equity audit. The DHS advisory study group is being led by Alex Grover, and we have an advisory program for students where they have a faculty member who works with them. And we're trying to focus on equity and SEL, social and emotional learning, as part of that. And Alex Grover is leading a revision of that program to make sure that we're focusing on that. The administration meets monthly with coaches from the Essex County Learning Community Grant and to be seeking to be an equity district, an equity seeking district. We have a policy subcommittee of the school committee that meets monthly to look at any policies, and will continue to do so. And I think the focus on that, one of the focuses this year among the subcommittee who will be looking at the policies as we do every year, as well as the faculty review, is looking at the language in the policies, looking at what they cover, and making sure that there is an attention to equity within those policies. We are preparing a curriculum for Juneteenth so that the students will be presented with information, appropriate information regarding the meaning of that day, along with what we're doing as your committee is doing. And finally, I did want to mention about hiring, and it's something that's been, you know, Charlie brought it up, and it's something that's certainly been on our radar through the years. And we tend, I think, in fact, all of our employment listings would say something like, you know, minority applicants encouraged to apply. But there are sort of a typical number of places you go to sort of recruit teachers, at least the online recruitment, and you get a bunch of applications and you go through them. And the question really is, how can we encourage more minority candidates to apply to work in Danvers? And I'm certainly interested, Charlie, if you know of any specific resources, or if anybody has some ideas about how we can do a better job of that, because you all have experience in ways that I certainly might not. if you have any ideas specifically as to how we could improve that process or make it more likely that we'll get a wider pool of applicants, I'd love to hear them. Not in the course of a meeting necessarily, even separately by email or a phone call. I'd be very interested in what has worked that you know about in other districts or in other areas of your own business life. So any information that you can give us would be helpful. We're trying, I think, and I do think we need to focus a little more on that. But by the same token, it'd be interesting if there were some ideas as to how we can make this the kind of place that applicants want to come to. Because, to some extent, you wonder, it's not necessarily easy, I would think, to be, in a district of 300 teachers or so to be one or two minority teachers. It probably takes a unique person to want to be one of the first, really. And so to get people to apply to work in Danvers is something we'd really like to look at as well. So any ideas I'd really love to hear at some point. David? I'm sorry, David has his hand up.
I'm sorry. Okay.
D, may I?
Yes, David. I'm sorry. Before you go, are you done, Eric?
I'm fine. I can take questions now. Yes, thanks, Dave.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Dee. And Eric, as you were speaking, I'm trying to take notes so that I could be an errand boy to bring all of this truth and enthusiasm to the next selectmen's meeting. But what I'm going to suggest and ask, would you be willing to be a 5-minute segment on the next Board of Selectmen's meeting to report to the board what you have just reported to us about progress in the Danvers School, and especially mentioning by name those people who are particularly committed and effective, because they need a little applause too. And I don't know that I could do that properly. And so I'm just, you can leave that up. You could just let me know later, because I'm sure the chairman would schedule you. And I think it would be really healthy for the board to know what's been going on in this regard down at the school. Thanks.
I would have no problem doing that, David. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Any question, comments for Eric?
Yeah, I would just say as well, I think your report was excellent, and thank you very much for the wisdom and enthusiasm and good judgment that you're bringing to the presentation, Eric. You did a fantastic job, and I've appreciated your work over the years. Yeah, let's work together on this. I think we can do some important things together. We've got Salem State, we've got a number of institutions of higher ed in our general community. Maybe we can come up with some unique and creative ways to bring students into the pipeline, get them credentialed, and bring them to Danvers. I think people would benefit from that. Let's just show it. Let's demonstrate how it can be done. So I'd love to work with you on that. And we can do some exciting and wonderful things. Let's work together. That sounds great. And again, I will take questions not just on this report, but if there are other things that people have an interest in, perhaps things I've talked about before, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Dave McKenna has a hand up.
Go ahead, David McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question I was thinking this early when Charlie was talking about the same subject. The laws right now make it very difficult to ask certain questions on a job applicant to prevent discrimination. How can we get around that and entice minority applicants and be able to choose them without being accused of discrimination or reverse discrimination? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can't say that I actually know the specific answer to that, David, but I would guess that, part of it is perhaps doing programs or recruiting at the right places too, that you're just going to widen the pool of candidates. And yes, I agree that you want to, ultimately that you want to get the best person for the job, but I think there are ways that by simply widening the pool, that you can have sort of a natural growth and diversity of your staff. But it's a fair point. It's something we'd have to look into.
And
you.
Deb has a hand up.
Sure, go ahead, Deb.
Sort of on this same topic, because I know I'm not going to remember to email, so I'm just going to mention this here. I know that there's different grants available from DESE. My school district is a recipient of it. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the grant right now, but when I do, I will actually send an email. And we're using it in Malden as sort of a twofold thing. Part of the grant we're using, it's a sort of a grow your own program. It's probably got a fancier name than that. And we're using it in a twofold way. One, encouraging students in the Malden Public Schools to who want to go into the field of education and giving them actual field experience while they're still students in the form of like student internships, and then giving them like professional development that's appropriate for their age group. And then the other sort of prong of the Grow Your Own program is looking at our education support professionals, who happen to be our most diverse pool of employees in our particular school district, and looking at people who are in that pool of employees who want to become credentialed and helping them to go down that path of becoming credentialed, because for a lot of people it might not be as difficult to get that teaching license as they think. It's just hard sometimes to actually figure out how to get from point A to point B. Because let's face it, the Department of Education doesn't always make it so easy to get a hold of that information.
Yeah, yeah.
Their website's not the best. And so I'm wondering if that's something that we can sort of, you know, put our heads together on and look at, you know, are there grants available to start looking at, you know, the students in the Danvers Public School, and, you know, students in you know, as was mentioned before, there's so many higher ed institutions, and actually going out when it's not so COVID-y, and you know, actually talking to students there, because I think it's a years-long process to grow a more diverse workforce, and I think it takes sort of a lot of feet on the ground out there, talking to people and sort of making it a grassroots effort. And I would love to, you know, help in any way I can. It's something we've been working on for several years now in Malden, where our workforce certainly does not at all reflect the community of students we teach, but we're working on it slowly but surely, and it takes years. And I would love to, you know, help in any way I can as well to bring a more diverse workforce to Danvers, because, you know, our students need to be taught by educators who reflect the broader world. So anything I can do to help.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. I also think it's probably not a situation limited to the school department. I think in general, when you talk about whether it's public works, police, fire, any of our town employees, you know, probably a greater diversity among the group of town employees generally is a worthy goal. And I think that was part of the information, Dee, that you and Rob and others presented last night.
That's right. Thank you. Anybody, any other hand, Eileen?
Just
Oh, I think Charlie.
what's that? I did it. I would just only say, if I could, only because I think it's important for us to continuously keep and recognize that this whole issue of cultural competency is not driven by color. Cultural competency is people who make the effort and work hard to understand what it means to live in a multicultural world. You don't have to be Black to be able to talk to Black people. You don't have to be white to only know how to talk to white people. But there are many people, and especially in our school system, we have so many teachers who have made the extra special effort to equip themselves to be able to be supportive and nurturing and enriching to all the students that we serve. The reason that we focus on this issue around the variations of colors, because when you're in the second grade, you don't know about cultural competency, you don't know about psychological development or theories of change. You just look at things and you see what you see. So we're trying to embed in our system all of the things that need to be in the system that send the messages, whether they're conscious or subliminal, that let people know that we understand who they are, we recognize who they are, we respect who they are, and we want to see them achieve at the limits of their potential. And that happens all over the place. And I just want to say, I'm from Malden, Massachusetts. My family's lived in Malden for 5 years, 5 generations. 5 generations. My brother was the first Black chairman of the Malden School Committee. So I just want to say that we've seen a lot in Malden. It's come a long way. But Danvers is a spectacular community, and I think we've got a lot to offer. And I'm looking forward as we go forward to see it happen. Thank you.
Perfect.
Dee, if I
Very
could have
much.
if I could have 30 seconds more.
Sure.
One of the things I meant to mention and will mention now is that I think that I don't want people to think that we are only focusing on, I mean, these are sort of big picture items and strategic plans and all of those things. But I think that those of us on the school committee involved in the school district administration, et cetera, recognize that one of the things we have to be cognizant of and learn more about and be more attentive to is the day-to-day experience of students who are different in our schools, and whether that difference is, it has to do with ethnicity or religion or someone's sexual orientation or how someone identifies. I think that we recognize in general that we need to be more intentional about looking at what the life of Danvers school students are on a day-to-day basis, in terms of how they relate to each other, how the faculty relates to them, what happens when students act out, what happens, and how are we going to deal with microaggressions or worse that happen, on a day-to-day basis in the school system. How do we stop that? How do we discourage it? How do we educate so that it doesn't happen? It obviously takes a community-wide effort. I've said before, the schools can do part of it, but it's also has to do with the parental roles in society and everything. I won't go down that road again. But I do want people to know that it is something that we are cognizant about, and I really think that we can and have to and will do a better job of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. I really appreciate. I will now move on to the 8th item on the agenda, which is the police liaison update. Lieutenant Rob Sullivan.
Thank you, Dee. I'll actually start with, because Dr. Desmond talked about it earlier and Eric was just talking about it, but recruitment, as it specifically applies to the police department. As I said earlier, part of the presentation that the working group and the town manager submitted to the select board 2 nights ago was to have a director of equity and inclusion. And one of the things that I talked about is exactly what Eric was just saying. So how we hire a town manager is different from how we hire a teacher, which is different from how we hire a police officer, which is different from how we hire a staff assistant. So specifically in policing, we have additional rules and regulations beyond local bylaws. Civil service, it's an archaic and tough system to work in. When it's good, it's really good. But when it's bad, it's also really bad. So to get applicants to come to apply to work for our police department, I believe the requirement is you have to live in Danvers for the year prior to taking the exam. So that's a tough hurdle for just people to get to begin with. So one of the things we can do is look at specifically recruiting and selling ourselves to they tend to be younger people in their early 20s that are taking these exams, to folks to take the exam while they're in Danvers. You have to pick the communities. You pick like 5 communities that you want to be on the list for, but the Danvers residents always get put to the top of our lists. But there are other things that can be looked at. We didn't, at the committee meeting the other night, we didn't get into the specific workings of each individual town group and the way we hire them. But in policing, there are ways to work. I don't want to say around, that might not be the right word, but to work with the civil service requirements. We can recruit lateral transfers from other police departments. So if we make ourselves more appealable, we might find a more diverse group of people. They don't have to take the exam in Danvers and have lived here for a year. They can already be a fully trained and hired police department at another civil service police department, and then they could come over to us. So those are things that this group could explore, as well as the potential for requesting specific lists from civil service. So you can request gender lists, you can request, I believe there's actually a list for bilingual law enforcement officers. So those would be ongoing conversations between the town manager, the future chief of police. We currently don't, we have an acting chief right now. Hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be getting a new chief. And then if the board directs this new DEI staff person, they'll be having those types of conversations. But we're certainly looking at ways that we can recruit people. Another thing we looked at as far as recruiting people, kind of an odd way around the mountain, is that one of the recommendations that our committee came up with was establishing employee service days for town employees. A lot of private businesses have this, where town employees, instead of coming to work today, could go work and provide a service to a charitable or nonprofit organization. One of the things that our group came up with is that if we do have a DEI staff person, maybe that individual could find charities and nonprofits that specifically focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have our staff members go to those organizations. We brought it back home specifically to the police, and getting our police officers into those organizations would help in that a lot of their clients, the only thing they might know about me is they see police on TV. So I must be like that police officer they see on TV. If they haven't worked on a committee with me, they've never met me at the police station, they know they have nothing to gauge who I am or who my coworkers are. They may only know that we arrested one of their relatives, or they may only know that we gave them a speeding ticket. So if we're able to go and work at these organizations and provide, in addition to providing the volunteer services that group might need, the hope is that we can connect with not just the staff members, but also the clients they serve on a new level, building new relationships, probably two groups of people who wouldn't really have interaction with each other. And if we're able to build those relationships, it may turn into a chance where we can recruit people to come apply for town jobs here in Danvers. I think somebody said this a few minutes ago, we've looked at places that this might work at right away. The COVID thing is there's not much by way of chances to go out and do these things yet, but it is something that we're looking at. It was part of our proposal, so hopefully the select board will direct the town manager to be able to go ahead and start that. And I think there are also some things that didn't actually need approval. He can do on his own, so that may get done as well. So for hiring and potential hiring and recruitment of more diverse pools of police applicants, those are the types of things that we're looking at. I also wanted to mention that this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. It's, I believe, their 40th anniversary this year. It's a week that's dedicated to learning about victimization, the effects victimization has on individuals, their families, friends, and the community, and to promote laws, policies, and programs to help victims of every crime. This year's theme is supporting victims, building trust, and engaging communities, with emphasis on the importance of leveraging community support to help the victims of crime. Those of you that have known me for a while know that prior to my position now. I was a criminal investigator, so a lot of my cases involve victims of violent crime. And I can tell you firsthand experience that victim advocate services, I've worked with them through the Essex County DA's office, as well as on the state level through the Commonwealth and also on the federal level. They provide amazing services to victims and their families. They're the ones who essentially, when our cases are done and wrapped up, these things can still go on for years through the court process. So having an advocate that can walk them through that process, point out resources, and just make things easier and more available to them, they're hugely impactful. And then also, I think Dave McKenna might have said earlier, with human trafficking, there's just an amazing group of victim advocates on the state level that when I used to work in investigations, whenever we did human trafficking organizations, our focus would always be on, they're not always women, sometimes they are men, but most of the time they are women, but providing them services. They're not offenders, they're not crime suspects, they're victims. Our target would be whoever's trafficking them. But the services that they would come out with, bags of clothes, bags of food, if they didn't want to accept our help, they could take stuff and leave with them. And also, the red tape was just cut instantly. They place a phone call, they would have a place for them to be sheltered for if even needed on weeks on end. And also instant access to hospitals. You didn't have to jump through hoops. So just great services they provide. So I'm glad to see that it's their week this week. And then last, I wanted to talk about an incident that our school resource officer, Officer Jason Skane, he's the officer that's assigned to the Holton Richmond Middle School. On the 14th, he was notified by school administration. The school had been notified by a parent about a swastika and a J that had been painted, so I believe it was spray paint, onto two trees in the woods surrounding the school. And also had supplied the parent who found it, notified the school, supplied some pictures as well as the detailed location so we could then find where it is and address it. And additionally, I believe there were a couple of groups of kids who had seen these trees out in the woods and had reported it. So Officer Skane went out with the information he was supplied by this parent who contacted the school. He was able to locate the trees. He called the town of Danvers Forestry Department, which came out. They had to get some specialized paint. I'm not a home do-it-yourselfer type person, so it's some type of an oil-based lacquer that was on the trees. And so they got some special tree paint that was able to cover it up. So they came out right after Jason had found where the trees were. They went back, they got the appropriate materials, brought it back, and covered up the paint. And then Officer Skane followed up later that day just to make sure that it had been addressed and they had been covered. And from the pictures and from what Officer Skane reported, they did look weathered. So the paint had been there for quite some time. It's not determined exactly when that was placed there. And that's all I have, Dean.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Rob. Any question, comments from any of the members?
David Mills has his hand up.
Yes, go ahead, David.
David, I sent you a request to unmute.
Yeah, sorry about this. Is a more difficult. I work on Zoom and Blue Jeans and this one, and this is much more cumbersome than the other one. So I've said that before. Yeah, Yeah, I heard Rob's wonderful presentation and comment upon the necessity of a Danvers police officer to live in Danvers for a year before he can apply to be a police officer. And I think whether that's a regulation or a rule or a statute, it should be changed. It's absolutely absurd. One of the greatest assistant town managers of our history was a woman who came to us from Reading. And she could have been the town manager here or in any community in Massachusetts and been a rock star. And there was a big commotion, 4 or 5 or 6 years ago at the time of selection of a new police chief in Danvers. In fact, the Danvers police officers set up a gauntlet in front of the Danvers High School auditorium so that the town meeting members coming in to vote on that proposal had to go through an intimidating gauntlet of Danvers police. It was absolutely disgusting, and I wished I had said something before. So, whatever the rule is, good police officers may be anywhere and everywhere, and heavens knows we don't have to have restrictions on the quality having something to do with geography that I don't believe has anything to do with the quality of a police officer. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Paul,
Sorry,
Eileen?
I
Uh,
was muted.
There we go.
I was
Dee's off
muted.
mute, and Paul, we can hear you.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
He's not on mute. I think we might have lost the audio for Paul.
Okay.
I don't think anybody else has a hand up.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Rob. Lieutenant Rob, you mentioned to me one time about another one of the work that, having kids in the school and having had my kids speak to school resource officers. If you want to just reiterate some of the things that some of those officers have become for these kids. I think you mentioned something about some communities are trying to get rid of them. Our resource officers are training and learning new skills into how to interact with the kids. You want to comment on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So in the past year, there have been some school districts and some pretty large school districts that are canceling the school resource officer program, just eliminating them altogether overnight without much discussion. Some of these school resource officers have more officers, like the school officer section has more officers assigned there than the entire town of Danvers does. So some of these school districts are enormous. And at that same time, where other communities around the country are getting rid of their programs, we've added to ours. When I started, it was just one individual. I believe it was a patrolman, Officer Mayos, 110 years ago. And it's now expanded to their division has a sergeant and 3 officers that work full-time in the schools. And I think it's really a testament as to how the town of Danvers and the Commonwealth operate. We passed juvenile justice reform just a few years ago, which was essentially the same way our school resource officers were operating even before this, which is something we've mentioned in our other committee meetings. You find that we're usually on the leading edge of things, and we're not trailing behind. In that the school resource officers are not disciplinarians. They're not meant to keep the kids. They're there to keep them safe, should they, be an intruder in the school or something like that. But they're not there for school discipline reasons. And at the time when some places are shutting down these programs, our school resource officers were going to specialized trainings for how to be stronger mentors to our kids. They also realize that, families that need their assistance, it's not cookie cutter. It's not one answer fits all. So they really spend a lot of time getting to know the kids, getting to know their siblings, getting to know their parents, and finding out whatever the problem is, whatever the issue is that they're facing, they're able to point them to the best and most appropriate resources and guide them. I've come across, when I was an investigator, I've worked on a lot of cases. There was a young boy that set fire to a house, and the house burnt down, and the school resource officers were just amazing. They knew all of the families, all of the kids involved. They really got us in contact right away. And they knew some of the problems and the issues that would come up during the investigation. So that really helped us get through. And because this was a juvenile case, the people do find this strange that when a juvenile commits a crime, it's not like an adult case. The focus of the juvenile court is to do what's in the best interest of the offender. So the focus of the juvenile court is to do what's best for that kid. How can we help that kid? So our SROs have been on board that for years. Additionally, I believe they're all coaches as well, because I always hear their hockey and baseball stories. So I think every one of them are coaches to continue and build that relationship with the kids. And I've seen it firsthand that kids that have graduated years ago, they always want to come back and see the teachers and see how the teachers are still doing. It also works out the same way with our SROs. They come back, they remember the SROs. We've got some really good and positive feedback. The newest one is Officer Mike Chase. He's up at Essex Tech, and from everything that I'm told, the kids as well as the administration love the work that he's doing there. I've seen a number of the videos. They have those like the pride rallies, so the cheer days or whatever. Like there's some big sporting event going on, and he's running around in the gym leading them all in chants. So it's been a really, really good program for us, as opposed to you see places. Some of you might remember the video a couple of years ago where there was a school resource officer. There was a girl who she was acting out or misbehaving in a classroom, and she was in one of those desks that you kind of have to sit down and squish into. And the officer came in and literally picked her up, and she came up off the ground. The desk was still attached to her and dropped her. That went viral. So that's what people were talking about when they're talking about militant over policing officers in schools. It's certainly not the program that we have here. So.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Rob. And as you mentioned earlier, a part of the welcoming community working group, that we spend a lot of time talking about those interactions, where we don't necessarily want to have less of them, but we want to have more of them, but positive ones, good ones. So thank you very much. I will now move on.
Dee, I'm sorry. It looks like Bill Graham has one last question.
Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, Bill, I'm going to unmute you or send a request.
Alliance Nebraska had a program where a school resource officer was funded half by the school district and half by the police department. And when the school district ran into financial problems, they discontinued that. A year later, they went back to it because they found it was so valuable for the school system that it was well worth the money they spent on it.
Thank you. Anyone else, Eileen?
No, it looks like that was it.
Thank you. So then moving on to the 9th item on the agenda, select board liaison update. David.
I just sent the request, David, to unmute.
This is so annoying. I apologize for being so grumpy. It's just that I do these meetings all day on other systems, and there's none of this problem of mute and unmute. We had a wonderful meeting yesterday with Eileen and Dee and the liaisons talking about just what it is a liaison is supposed to be doing. And I did a lot of thinking about what I have done in the last, year or two or three, when I have been the selectman liaison to this committee. And what I have done is essentially nothing, because I saw my role more as bringing to the committee what was going on with the selectmen that would be of interest to the committee. And then I realized, what am I doing? I should be bringing to the selectmen what is going on with this committee. And that is one of the reasons I asked Eric if he would be willing to come and take a 5 or 10 minute slot at the next selectmen's meeting to report on those things that he reported on tonight that I think are going to be very important to the board and to the community. So in any event, I now have redefined my job as liaison of bringing to the board stuff that's going on here, and occasionally, if there is something going on with the board, to bring it here. This week, there's only one thing. We had a presentation by the members of the Welcoming Committee Community Working Group. I think Dee may have held this earlier, or someone held it up. It is a magnificent piece of community work, and I was very skeptical because I didn't think anything could possibly be accomplished because I wasn't on the committee. Well, as I read the report, it's a good thing I wasn't on the committee because I should not have been there. It was a beautiful, balanced approach to some things, and I thought it was really beautifully done. Now, on May 20th at the selectmen's meeting, there is going to be a more global discussion of the items and recommendations in that report. And the town manager has solicited from any source any comment people want to make with respect to that report, and he will try, and the board will try to incorporate all of that into any official action. For example, hopefully hiring the resource person that was defined by Rob in his presentation tonight. The only thing that scared me on Tuesday night, I think it was Mr. Powers, who is kind of the ringleader of the presentation. He asked for suggestions from the board as to what kind of a logo should be used to identify this report in the committee. And one of the members of the board held up the blue line flag and suggested that that should be the logo for this community report. I could have fallen off of my chair. I couldn't believe the suggestion that was made after all we know and after all that has been written. So I'm just saying, I'm terribly distressed by that. I will make my position known to the board members and to the town manager. I want this committee to know that the suggestion that the blue line flag be a symbol of anything that is official in the town of Danvers is absolutely terrifying. That flag has become a symbol of violence between police and citizens throughout this country. And anybody who could even think of flying it, well, I shouldn't say that. 6,000 or 7,000 people voted other than the way I did in this town election. And so I see flags on pickup trucks around the town and citizens use it.
David, quick, just and maybe Lieutenant Rob can sorry for interrupting you. Maybe Lieutenant Rob can chime in if he remembers. And I might go back and look. I'm not sure if you're speaking of the conversation that happened while we were still doing the presentation, but my understanding of the comment wasn't this, and I may not have been there, and I'll look again. But my understanding of the comment wasn't to suggest it as being the cover. It was more that, during the conversation and the discussions, which were honestly, I mean, it was great and candid and respectful, and everybody's point of view was taken into account. It was more that this is some of the things that I had suggested, or that these are some of the things that were suggested. But in the end, there were other things that, the majority of the group and everybody came to the consensus to as what should be in the report. and we talk about signage and flag. We talk about the flag that was approved by Congress and things like that that are actually in the report. I'm not sure if that's well into, but I think that there may be a misunderstanding there. Just, I don't know if Lieutenant Rob remembers or wants to clarify, but
Yeah, in case everybody's wondering and wants to know, it wasn't me. I didn't hold up any flags or signs. It wasn't me. I think we had a couple of different flag suggestions or design. One of the suggestions were to maybe engage some either students in town or artists
exactly.
who were in town that might be able to make a almost like a town flag that would stand for the town of Danvers, but it's all of its frontline workers and first responders, police, fire, EMS, DPW, and looking for like a new piece of artistry to be a new town flag. That was separate from, we looked at, and one of the charges is how can we support first responders without being offensive and without making people scared. So one of the recommendations that came up in the committee was to use during National Law Enforcement Memorial Week for the police, there's a National Law Enforcement Memorial flag. It's a white flag. It has a police badge on it and a red rose. And that flag is exclusively used at the Law Enforcement Memorial. It's not to support police, it's to recognize
The
law
sacrifice.
enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. So that's more of a, not supporting, but like a memorial. And a link to Danvers, we actually do have a Danvers officer, George Nowak. His name is on the Law Enforcement Memorial. His death was law enforcement or in the line of duty related death. And there's also a fire flag. So it was recommended that during the fire week, the town would fly the fire department's memorial flag to recognize firefighters who were killed in the line of duty. Interestingly, the fire department also has a firefighter's name on the firefighter memorial. Danvers firefighter was killed with a line of duty related death. So those are the two flags. There was a suggestion not by our committee. A member of the committee who's also a select board member had suggested in the meeting and held up an image of the thin blue line flag, but that was not contained in our report.
That's correct. I just wanted to, as a point of clarification, Donna, I think you had your hand up. And Donna also, for full disclosure, was a member of the working group that the town manager had put together.
No, I was horrified and I was livid. I'm kind of following up with what David Mills said. I didn't hear the part about it being the cover of the report, but I thought after spending 4 months talking about what that flag symbolized and why this committee was put together and what the effect was on the community, I was dumbstruck that a select board member who was part of that group actually said, I was glad that the recommendation was made that we should develop a flag, because that was what this report was recommendations to the select board on things we'd like to see to make the town a little more inclusive and welcoming to the citizens, all of them. And I've just gotten to a point in my life where I'm having a really hard time keeping my mouth shut when I see things that piss me off. But because Dee was there and Rob Sullivan was there, and there were a lot of people that put a lot of work into it, I kind of just froze my face and kept my mouth shut. But I was horrified that a select board member actually said, I was glad that you made the recommendation to come up with a flag, because this was my idea. And she holds up the thin blue line flag. I didn't even know what to say. I didn't know what to do.
Thanks, Donna.
I think it just shows us that that this committee still has a purpose, and we still have a lot of work to do, because there are people that are not hearing things. I don't know how, but we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't. I don't think that was. If that's the comment, I just wanted to clarify what exactly was said. It wasn't part of the report per se.
Not,
that
it was not part of the presentation.
The cover. That's correct.
Hmm.
Eileen, do I have anybody else hand up?
I don't see anybody. I don't have Paul on camera, but I know he is back. So I'm gonna, Paul, if you can, yeah, I saw him on mute. So I didn't know if Paul had something to add. I know he got cut off earlier.
Yeah, I got cut up for quite a while, so I missed all of this. Somewhere, somehow I'll pick it up, but I just want to go back to, maybe I missed it and I don't want to, I want to go through the whole thing, but I got cut off right after David had mentioned something about living in town. And my question was to Rob, and he might have answered it, someone might have asked. When a police officer is all of a sudden is hired by the town, now are they required to live in town, period?
They're not. Danvers, there are some communities that do require that. Danvers does not require you to live in town. The
Okay,
only
fine.
requirement is the civil service. So
Right.
1 year prior to taking the exam is when
All
you have
right,
to live in
now
town.
let me ask another follow-up. That's not a follow-up to that question, but what is the present, unless it was asked before, what's the gender makeup, male and female, on the police force as right now, full-time police officers?
We have 47 officers and we
Rob, I
have
think it's
four women.
4 women, are they all
Yes.
patrol persons, or are they part of the rank?
Yeah, so we had, they are all patrol officers.
Okay.
I should know this off the top of my head, shouldn't I? They're all patrol officers.
Ashley Sanborn is a lieutenant.
It's lieutenant, yes. Ashley's a lieutenant.
Yep.
So
Ashley's a lieutenant. Sorry, and then Adrian Costa, Stephanie, I can never say her last name, but I know Stephanie, and then
Stephanie Winterberg and Suzanne Tibbetts.
yes, they are patrol.
All right, of the, you said 48 total in town? Maybe I missed the number. What's the racial breakup, if there is any?
So all of our officers are white.
Okay, I think we still have some work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
David Mills.
David Mills has a hand up, Dee.
Okay, Steve, may I just comment on, we don't have blacks living in Danvers. How are we going to have a black police officer in the town of Danvers if it has to, it's just this residency thing has to change. And I'm going to request that this committee think about that and take whatever formal action we can do to eliminate that as a requirement, because we will not have minority officers until we have a body of minority citizens, which we don't have. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Dee, may I clarify one thing?
Yes, please.
And Rob can probably correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that the residency requirement is a Danvers rule. I think it might be a civil service, which is set at the state level. Is that correct, Rob?
That's correct. There's no Danvers rule or regulation. This is a civil service requirement. So for them to take the civil service exam and claim, they can still take it, not living in Danvers, but civil service regulations give residents preference.
Right.
So if you live in Danvers and lived in the community for a year prior to taking the exam, you get bumped to the top of the list, or you get extra points, or you get preference.
And we have to hire in order of that list. So it makes it hard for us. We would have to jump a lot of people to get somebody who was not living in Danvers for a year prior to taking it, even if they had put Danvers as a preferred community for them to work in.
Question.
I'm just dealing with the recruitment issue isn't just living in Danvers, it's also a timing issue, because they have to have, so whenever the exam falls, they have to have lived in Danvers for the year prior. And some people have missed it by days and weeks and are no longer qualified to, they can still apply for Danvers, but they're going to be much further down. And being a smaller department, a larger department could hire 40, 50, 60 people in a year. We hire 2 or 3 every couple of years. So we don't get down that far on the list and very often. So a couple of issues, timing as well as residency. But there are some ways to call for specialized lists. And there are also, we call it poaching. If we're looking at other police departments and we try and get their good people to come work for us. So doesn't always work out because other police departments don't want to give up their good people to send them to us. But if they were to come over through a transfer, there is no timing requirement. There is no residency requirement. They could just simply lateral over. The only catch is that it does have to be a civil service department. So if they work for a department that is not civil service right around us and they wanted to transfer to us, they couldn't because it's a civil service transfer.
Perfect.
Question.
Thank you very much.
I have a question, D.
Yes, Paul.
Just one last thing on that. Is the civil service, is that state, Rob, is that a state law?
Mhm.
It is. Huh?
That's a state agency and their state laws that govern that.
And where would, just as a committee, where would you go to try to get something like that changed? Would that have to be through legislative action?
Yeah.
I'd start with Sally Kearns.
Well, that's where I was heading.
I'm also happy to talk through this a bit more with you if you want to email me some questions too, if you have more in-depth questions.
Do you want me to email you?
Yeah. If you have
my luck, I'd lose email.
I know, I can't even find you on my screen anymore. But if you have more specific questions or more in depth, you can feel free to email myself and Rob as well.
I might give you a phone call. That would be better.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Why don't you email me your phone number if I don't have it? Would you please? Yeah.
You got it.
I missed a lot of what, and I missed all of what Donna said. So I just like to be caught up a little bit. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I will now move on. I think Pastor Douglas Voy was unable to join us today. So any new business? That's the 11th item on the agenda.
It's not an item on the agenda, but I'd like to mention something if I could.
Yes, Paul.
Just a reminder, May 4th, I believe it's May 4th, is Election Day in Danvers. And for the school committee, we have 4 people running for 2 spots. And then we have for the select board, we have 4 people running for 2 slots. And I have had the opportunity, as I hope some of you have, I believe if you go to the DCAT and then go on YouTube, you can get an idea of what some of these candidates stand for and why they're running. And I encourage you to do that if you haven't done it already, because there's some interesting candidates and there's some very, very great comparisons that you can draw. And that's all I'll say about that. So May 4th, DCAT, YouTube, school committee, select board, and I'm not sure some of the other elected officer candidates have done presentations, but I know there are, I believe, at least 3 of the select board candidates and all 4 of the school committee candidates. It's quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else?
Yeah, just one quick section. I wanted to say that Dan was established in 1757, 264 years ago. 264 years ago. And I want us to just consider, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what have we accomplished? How much have we accomplished? How far have we moved in 264 years, representing in the town of Danvers what it is we think it means to be a multicultural democracy in America? So no questions, no comments, just think about it. 264 years, how far have we come?
Thank you.
And Jorge had his hand up as well, I saw.
Yes, go ahead, Jorge.
Hi. I think it was Paul or Rob had recently, not recently, but it mentioned, and it caught my attention about getting more young people involved, like high school, college age kids. And I saw on my daughter brought it to my attention. This young woman at Bishop Fenwick High School was highlighted in this Chronicle story. Basically, the Chronicle story was about Catholic School Foundation and how she was able to go to this Catholic school, even though her family might not even be able to afford it. But tangentially, they mentioned that she had started at Bishop Fenwick a diversity and inclusion club, and that she was the president. Her name's Brianna Benoit. And I was just wondering if, I mean, she doesn't live in Danvers, I don't believe, but if, I don't know, we might want to include her, invite her, chat with her, some sort of cross-pollination with our club and these young kids in their club, possibly. I just brought that, see if you guys, what you thought about it.
Sure. Let me put that down. So
Yeah, if the board is interested, Dee, if Jorge could get me her contact, I can reach out to her and see if she'd like to come to a meeting to speak.
yeah, Jorge, if you can forward her contact to Eileen, we will reach out and see, if that's something that we can talk to her and see if she's willing to, and what are some of the things and what the best way to get that done will be.
Okay. I will dig into that and see if I can find that information.
I know you probably don't have her contact information.
I could probably get it.
At least the name and the school. There's gotta be a way, or maybe the article. If you have the actual article, maybe the information there that can lead us to how to get hold of her.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a video clip. I think it's on YouTube or something. It's kind of interesting, just the whole foundation and how they are able to fund these things. But I sent the link to Eileen earlier this week.
Yes.
Maybe you still have it, and you might want to send it out to everyone.
I think I do, and I will forward it.
And I will find out. I mean, my daughter attends Bishop Fenwick too, so I have.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with your daughter trying to hunt down her contact information than me from town hall going to.
Yeah.
So.
Or maybe one of the administrators or something in the school that I can talk to. So I'll get on that.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other new business? Anybody else, Eileen? I can't see anyone on the screen, so forgive me.
I don't see anyone else. Just for transparency as well, I don't have any emails from public comment, and I did not receive any calls. So.
Perfect. So I want to thank everyone for tonight's meeting. It's past 9 o'clock. Before I get a motion to adjourn, I just want to encourage everyone to look at the report from the Welcoming Community Working Group that Lieutenant Rob mentioned earlier. It's a really extensive report. Donna, myself, and Lieutenant Rob Sullivan. Lieutenant was wearing quite a few hats there: town meeting member, police, human rights and inclusion liaison, and Donna and myself were also part of that committee. It was really thoughtful. It was, we were really open and honest with our feelings, our discussions, and it was amazing how we were able to come together in the end to put this wonderful report together. There's a lot of items on there. Some of them will require the select board to get going, but there are other ones that, there's going to be a lot of stakeholder in town that will just take and run with it. And it was also very enlightening to see that the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee was really recognized there for some of the work that we do. So what we do is value, and what we do is really important for our town. So let's continue to go at it. It's not easy. Like someone said in the video, these conversations are uncomfortable. And the more uncomfortable they are, that means that we are actually doing a good job. So let's stay at it. And I would need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Who was that? Was that Paul?
Paul.
Paul.
Okay.
Second, Donna?
Second by Donna. Bill Graham,
Yes.
Deb Gesualdo,
Yes.
Donna Hopkins,
Yes.
Jorge Sanchez Salazar,
Yes.
David McKenna,
Yes.
Charles Desmond,
I saw his hand go up.
I got you this
Thank
time,
you.
yes.
Paul Polak,
Yes.
Kristen Perkins,
Yes.
and I am yes. So thank you very much and good night, Danvers.